For him, the camera only moves to reflect a change of emotion, never on a move, not on a physical movement.
In Unbreakable, there are over 30 scenes that are all shot in one take. It's scary to do because we never shot any safety coverage. He just knew that this is how the shot was going to appear in the film.
Basically, the number one benefit of pacing it like that is that you feel part of that world more so. It helps me achieve a symbiotic relationship between the main character and the audience, which is the goal.
The setting and the location and the world that filmmakers create is always an important character of the film. And in particular in Unbreakable, there were really two worlds that were created. There was the world of David Dunn, and there was the world of Elijah Price, the Samuel Jackson character.
There was a big sort of design premise, which was that the David Dunn world was a warm world, and then the Elijah world was a cold, steely world.
Ultimately, we learn that he is a superhero. And so the idea was that as we went through the movie, at certain points, color could be added, more sort of primary type colors that you would have in a comic book.
Knight has very strong opinions about how his character should look. I would think that because of the bizarreness of Sam's character, it might have been a little easier for them to find things for me to wear. Mostly shapeless clothes in this particular film. It's not my finest hour style-wise.
The main big design thing for him was the waterproof poncho, which then, when he goes to do his heroic act, takes on a mantle of hero, so then we're going into the comic book scenario. And originally we were going to push the fabric as well as the whole scale and structure of the garment, to give it all this sort of sense of drama. In the end, we kept the nature of the fabric the same, but so we just changed the scale a bit. So as he goes through that sequence, it becomes slightly more dramatic. It's very subtle. And so unless you really study it, you wouldn't notice it.
I think my only contribution was purple. Only because I thought of Elijah as very regal, and that's the color for regality.
So establish this sort of turtleneck and this purple colour that comes into play in his childhood. Then when we see him in the comic book store for the first time as an adult, he's got these things going, the blacks and the purples and the turtleneck,
That was my idea, the glass cane. It was a great look. It was something that was almost transparent that he walked with, that he used, so he had this gait and he had this transparent thing with this silver top, and it was kind of elegant to me, that you could see through it, and it was a statement of sorts. Sturdy but fragile.
I based his hair on Frederick Douglass, which is this sort of slightly sort of sideways thing. So that's the one thing about him, which everything else is all kind of, perfect, and then there's just this slight kind of off-balance thing on the head.
A lot of talk about that hair. I don't it's like, hey, it's just a character.
Another reason to build that kind of structure where David would go from cool to warm, and Elijah from warm to cool. It was the idea of reflections and inverted images and symmetrical things, because there is something symmetric about Elijah and David.
Good cannot exist without evil, and evil cannot exist without good, and so basically Elijah's character needed to find the hero so he could take his mantle and be the villain.
We had very specific colors for each character. Sam Jackson had his purple color. David Dunn had, his green color. We introduced in the final sequence, or the sequence that leads up to the final sequence, color that started out as sort of muted color and then became stronger as David Dunn starts to perceive his powers.
When we see David Dunn in the train, there's that little girl when the camera's going back and forth. She was a colour pop, in that bright yellow. So we used sort of the comic book idea of colour pops and tried to choreograph it, I suppose, really, so that you had always this sort of little interesting thing that you were drawn to that could be a signal or something of importance.
More and more as I make movies, I find out how important sound is to movies and storytelling and the creation of atmosphere by sound. And in Unbreakable was really my most ambitious ideas for the movie. And so, I brought in Richard King, and he started working on the movie really early on and started preparing sound effects for all the scenes that we were editing. And we told him one thing, which was, don't use any sounds that have been used before. Don't use anything from a library. I want the film to have a completely unique feel, something original that we've never heard before.
The scene where Elijah's falling down the stairs, we only hear the sound of him falling down the stairs when we see him. It cuts back and forth between relative silence and these horrible bone cracks as he's careening down the stairs. When he reaches the bottom of the stairs, he has this moment of horrible realization that David did see this gun. And the way, again, Knight designed that scene gave us the opportunity to use various subway train sounds, pitched to different degrees. We also used pitched wolf howls, a pack of wolves howlings, and is the sound that segues into the next scene, which is David pulling up in the bus, getting out, and meeting his son.
One thing we did on Unbreakable that was great is to have James Newton Howard, the composer, start composing the music based on the script.
The thing that we talked about mostly was the idea that the music be, and this is a word he used a lot, have a singular quality to it. A singular quality meaning that, the kind of thing that you could hear just one or two or three or four or five notes from and immediately say, that's the music from Unbreakable. And that's not just in terms of melody, a thing you can whistle, but somehow that the music would have a quality to it, a tonality, a life of its own, a personality that would be just as distinctive as the film.
This is East Rail 177. Next stop, Philadelphia.